rain came down in sheets, soaking Seattle in a melancholy that mirrored the emptiness inside Jackson Pierce's chest. From the back seat of his sleek black Mercedes, he stared out the tinted window, barely registering the blur of red brake lights and umbrella-covered pedestrians. He had just walked out of his own engagement party, alone. Not because of a scandal, not even because of a fight. He simply couldn't fake it anymore. Another woman who wanted the lifestyle, not the man. Another future built on shallow promises. His name, his fortune, his empire. It had become a mask people fell in love with. But not him. Never him. The car slowed at a red light near Pike Place Market, and that's when he saw her. She was standing alone in the downpour, no umbrella, hugging a worn-out backpack as if it were the only thing she had left. Her long chestnut hair clung to her pale face, and her eyes, vivid green like the forest after a storm, locked onto his through the glass for one fleeting second. In that moment, the rest of the world blurred away. "Stop the car," Jackson ordered sharply. "Sir?" the driver questioned, eyes darting to the rearview mirror. "I said stop." Before the vehicle fully halted, Jackson was already out, his leather shoes splashing into puddles. He approached her slowly, cautiously, as thunder rolled above them. "You all right?" he asked, voice steady despite the wind. She eyed him warily. Her lips trembled from the cold. "You don't know me." "Number, but I'd like to change that," he replied. "At least let me get you somewhere warm." "Why?" she asked, arms still wrapped tightly around her backpack. "Out of pity?" "No," he said, shaking his head slowly. "Because something tells me you shouldn't be alone tonight." She stared at him for a beat too long. Suspicion battled with exhaustion in her eyes. She was drenched, her blouse plastered to her skin, her heels broken. Dignity still clung to her, fragile but fierce. "Fine," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. Jackson led her to the car. The driver opened the door, confused but silent, and she hesitated for just a second before stepping inside. He didn't take her to a five-star hotel or his private condo. Instead, he directed the driver to the Wildflower, a quiet boutique hotel he owned discreetly under a different company, a place that felt less like opulence and more like sanctuary. Inside the hotel, the warmth and soft amber lighting felt like stepping into another world. The receptionist, who knew Jackson well, simply handed him a key, no questions asked. "This way," he said, leading her down the hall to the suite on the top floor. Once inside, she looked around cautiously. The room wasn't flashy, no gold trim or chandeliers, just muted colors, oil paintings, and the soft scent of lavender in the air. "You can use the shower. There are robes in the closet," he offered gently. "I'll have hot food sent up." She turned to him, still unsure. "Why are you doing this?" "I don't have an answer that will satisfy you tonight," he said honestly. "But you're safe here. That's all that matters." After a long pause, she gave a small nod. Jackson stepped out of the suite, closing the door softly behind him. Downstairs in the lounge, he loosened his tie and stared out the rain-soaked window, heart pounding. He couldn't explain it, but there was something about her, something broken yet unyielding, like a symphony cut off mid-note. Meanwhile, Alara Sutton stood in the steam of the shower, trembling, not from the cold, but from something else. Shock, confusion, a strange flicker of trust in a stranger who had shown her more kindness in 10 minutes than anyone had in years. She didn't know who he really was, and he had no idea that her story was far more tragic and more dangerous than she let on. The soft hum of the rain tapping against the windows filled the suite like a lullaby. Inside, the storm's roar had softened into a cocoon of warmth and quiet, offering sanctuary from the chaos outside. Jackson Pierce stood near the window, his reflection barely visible in the glass. His jaw was tense, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass of untouched scotch. He had sent up a tray of soup, warm bread, herbal tea, and a robe. Not designer, not silk, just simple cotton comfort. It was strange, he admitted to himself. He'd rescued women before, from flat tires, awkward dates, broken hearts, but never like this. Never from the edge of despair. He wasn't sure why he cared so much. He wasn't sure why the image of her, soaked in the rain, clinging to her backpack like a lifeline, wouldn't leave his mind. When the door finally opened behind him, he turned and forgot how to breathe. Alara stood there barefoot, wrapped in the robe, her wet clothes folded neatly in her arms. Her chestnut hair was towel-dried and loose around her shoulders. No makeup, no act, just soft, clear skin and eyes that had cried more tears than any 25-year-old should. "Is it okay if I sit?" she asked softly. He gestured to the small dining table near the window. "Please." She sat down, folding her hands in her lap. He noticed the way her fingers curled together, nervous, practiced, like she was used to being on guard. He poured her tea and slid the bowl of soup toward her. "Eat first. Talk later." For a few moments, only the quiet clink of the spoon against porcelain filled the room. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was almost a whisper. "I used to be someone else." He leaned forward, not pushing, just listening. "I was a pianist, classically trained. My mother was my first teacher. My dad built me a custom upright piano when I was 8. I was set to debut at Carnegie Hall in New York 3 years ago." Jackson blinked slowly, caught off guard. "That's not just someone. That's extraordinary." She smiled bitterly. "It was, until the accident." Her gaze drifted to the rain-streaked window. "My parents were driving to surprise me before a big audition. They were hit by a drunk driver on the interstate. Gone instantly." Jackson's chest tightened. He didn't speak. "I lost everything that day. Not just them. My music, my home, my heart." She swallowed hard, the memory still raw. "I trusted a man, someone close. He promised to help handle the estate. I was drowning in grief. I signed whatever he asked me to. Turned out he drained every account, took my parents' insurance money, even sold my piano." Her hands trembled on the table. Jackson wanted to reach out, but he didn't. "I've been moving from one gig to another, coffee shops, small bars, playing background music while people talk over me like I'm furniture, sleeping in hostels, hiding from everything I once was. Because asking for help," she shook her head, "felt like giving up." Jackson finally spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "That's not weakness. That's survival." She met his eyes, surprised by his sincerity. "You don't need saving, Alara," he added, "but you deserve peace, and someone who sees you, not the weight you carry." Something in her cracked. Not a breakdown, but a breath, like she'd finally exhaled after holding her lungs full for too long. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for tonight, for not asking questions you had every right to." "I didn't help you because I wanted answers," he said. "I helped because you look like someone who hadn't been seen in a long time." They sat in silence after that, sipping tea and listening to the storm outside. No touch, no kiss, just two souls, bruised and wandering, meeting in the stillness of a single night. Jackson looked at her across the table and knew this wasn't infatuation. It wasn't about beauty or tragedy. It was something deeper, something he couldn't yet name, but something he wasn't ready to let go of either. The golden rays of dawn crept across the horizon, bathing the Seattle skyline in warm amber. Inside the luxurious suite on the top floor of the Haven Hotel, soft beams of sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, dancing across the room like whispers of a new beginning. Ilara stirred. For a fleeting second, she forgot where she was. The mattress beneath her was impossibly soft. The sheets smelled of lavender and luxury. Her body, exhausted from weeks of uncertainty, had finally rested. But as reality clawed its way back in, her heart began to pound. She bolted upright. Where was she? Then she remembered. The storm, the stranger, the soup, the man with eyes like ice and words that felt too kind to be real. Her gaze landed on a small card on the nightstand, carefully handwritten. "Take your time. You're safe here. Jay." Her breath caught. There was something so gentle about it, so protective, yet simple. She held it in her hand for a long moment, letting the words soak in. Wrapped in the robe, she stepped into the adjoining lounge, curious and cautious. The suite was a work of art, soft colors, minimalist design, and a view of the city that stole her breath. It was too much, too perfect. She needed to leave before the dream cracked open into a nightmare. Just as she reached the hallway, hushed voices floated from the elevator lobby. She stayed in Mr. Pierce's personal suite. Ilara, one staff member whispered, clearly trying to be discreet. You mean she's his guest? I can't believe it. Jackson never brings anyone here. Her blood ran cold. Mr. Pierce? Jackson Pierce? Her heart thudded in her chest like a warning bell. She'd heard that name before, on news broadcasts, in business magazines, in whispered conversations among Seattle's elite. Billionaire real estate mogul, cold, unattached, ruthless in boardrooms. And she had spent the night in his private suite? A wave of nausea rose in her throat. He hadn't told her. He let her believe he was just a stranger, a man who saw her pain and offered comfort. And now it felt like everything was staged. Another man pretending to care, pretending to listen, while quietly holding the upper hand. Just like Austin, her ex, the one who smiled while robbing her blind. A lump formed in her throat. How could she have let herself be so vulnerable again? How could she have believed him? Without another thought, Ilara turned on her heel. She didn't bother changing into her clothes, just slipped them into her backpack, pulled on the hotel slippers, and headed for the service stairs. She couldn't bear to take the elevator, not with staff watching her like a rumor waiting to go viral. By the time Jackson returned, the morning had already begun. He walked in with a tray in hand, fresh fruit, buttery croissants, pressed orange juice. He wore no suit, just a soft white button-up rolled at the sleeves and gray slacks. He looked lighter, hopeful, until he saw the empty bed, the rumpled sheets, the robe tossed aside. His smile faded, confusion rippling across his features. He checked the bathroom, empty, the lounge silent. Something was wrong. He picked up the note he'd left and saw it still sitting where he placed it, untouched. Then an alert buzzed on his phone from the front desk security feed. He opened it. There she was, Ilara on the screen, slipping quietly down the stairwell exit, her face pale and eyes swimming with something he hadn't seen last night. Betrayal. Jackson's chest tightened. He stared at the image, the way she clutched her backpack like armor, how her steps were quick but uncertain. She hadn't run, but she had fled. He sank onto the edge of the bed, the breakfast tray still in his hands. He should have told her who he was. He should have trusted her with the truth before she found it on her own. But trust wasn't something Jackson Pierce knew how to give freely. His past had taught him that most people only loved the idea of him. The money, the name, the power, never the man. And now the one woman who didn't ask for any of that had vanished, thinking he was just like all the rest. He exhaled slowly, setting the tray down as emotion welled in his throat. For the first time in years, Jackson Pierce's heart ached. Not for what he'd lost, but for what he might never get the chance to hold again. Seattle's skies wept for days after Ilara left, as if the rain had become a mirror to Jackson Pierce's restless heart. On the surface, he returned to his high-rise offices, brokered multi-million-dollar deals, and played his part as the poised, unshaken tycoon. But beneath that calm exterior, he was unraveling. No meeting held his attention. No contract thrilled him. No woman tempted him, because none of them were her. Every corner of the city reminded him of that rainy night. The night he saw a stranger, and for the first time in years, didn't feel like one himself. He tried to push her from his mind, but Ilara had burrowed into places inside him he didn't even know existed. After 2 sleepless weeks, he gave in. He hired a private investigator, a woman named Marin Hart, smart, discreet, and unshakable. He gave her one photo, captured from hotel footage, and a single instruction. Find her. But if she doesn't want to be found, let her go. Marin studied his face before nodding. This isn't just guilt, is it? Jackson looked out the window, jaw clenched. It's something more. Meanwhile, Ilara Sutton had disappeared from the world of the wealthy and re-emerged like a ghost in the city's shadows. She'd taken on a new name, Ellie Summers, and found refuge in a tucked-away cafe near the harbor called the Violet Room. It was quiet, small, the kind of place where the baristas knew your drink and strangers never asked questions. The owner, a kindly older woman named Della, had heard her playing the piano once after hours and immediately offered her the evening slot. Now Ilara played 4 nights a week for tips and meals. She wore plain black dresses, kept her hair in a soft braid, and never used her real name. No one suspected the girl who filled the cafe with aching, haunting melodies had once been destined for Carnegie Hall. And no one knew that every time she closed her eyes over the keys, she wasn't just playing music. She was remembering Jackson's voice, his silence, the night he looked at her like she mattered. But she couldn't forgive the lie. She couldn't afford to believe in another powerful man again. In her duffel bag, still zipped tightly, was the designer coat he had placed around her shoulders that stormy night. It still smelled faintly like cedar and rain. She hadn't worn it once. Not because she didn't need it, but because it reminded her of everything she'd tried to leave behind. That night, the sky turned silver with another storm. Thunder cracked, and people shuffled inside the cafe to escape the downpour. Ilara sat at the piano, fingers gliding into a new piece she'd written. It was soft at first, like a lullaby drifting through memories, then darkened with ache and longing. She didn't notice the door open, didn't hear the sudden hush from the crowd, but she felt it, a shift in the air, a current in her chest that hadn't stirred in weeks. Her fingers faltered, and when she looked up, her breath caught in her throat. There, standing at the back of the cafe, drenched from the storm but unmoving, was Jackson Pierce. His blue eyes locked onto hers across the room, like a secret only they shared. He didn't smile. He didn't move. He simply stood there dripping, breathing hard, as if he'd run through the night just to find her. Ilara's hands trembled on the keys. 1,000 emotions surged through her. Anger, fear, hope, hurt. And under it all, in that dangerous flicker of wanting. The last chord echoed as silence fell between them, heavier than thunder. She rose slowly, her heart a mess of panic and fury. "What are you doing here?" she whispered when he reached the edge of the piano, his voice low and soaked in remorse. "I couldn't stop looking," Jackson said, "but I never wanted to chase you, only to see if you were okay." "Do I look okay?" She shot back, arms folded, shielding herself. He searched her face, noting the dark circles, the slimmer frame, the fire in her eyes that no storm could ever drown. "You look like someone I should have been honest with from the start." The cafe seemed to hold its breath. Ilara's voice trembled. "You lied by omission. I didn't want you to see him. The man in the magazines," Jackson said. "I wanted you to see me." She shook her head, pain flashing across her face. "I did see you. That's what makes this hurt so much." They stood there, strangers but not, lovers but not, two souls who had found something rare, only to have it shattered by secrets. Rain drummed against the windows again, mimicking the night they first met, and once again, fate brought them face to face. But this time, love would have to fight harder to survive the storm. The rain was relentless, drenching the world in a wash of gray as Ilara stepped outside. The city felt smaller tonight, heavier. It was the same sky that had witnessed their first encounter, but now it was no longer full of possibilities. Now it was full of questions. Jackson stood a few paces away, his silhouette dim in the mist, looking like a man who had seen everything but still didn't know what to say. He wasn't the polished billionaire anymore. Tonight he was just a man. Just Jackson. Ilara's heart beat wildly in her chest as she took a step toward him. Her eyes were cold, her expression a mask of defiance. "Why did you lie to me?" Her voice was soft but filled with betrayal. Jackson flinched. The storm was nothing compared to the storm raging inside him. He had to make her understand, even if the words felt like poison in his throat. "I didn't," he said, stepping closer, but giving her space. "I just didn't want my name to change how you saw me. For once, I wanted to meet someone who saw me. Not my fortune, not my past. Just me." Her chest tightened, and a hollow ache formed in her gut. She had always believed that, if given the chance, she could see the truth in someone. But now that truth felt like a bitter lie. She shook her head slowly, her eyes narrowing. "I thought you were different, but you hid behind a mask, just like the others. Everyone always does. And when it comes down to it, you're no different, Jackson." "I wasn't hiding," he whispered, his voice raw with an emotion she couldn't place. I was hoping that this time I wouldn't lose you to the man they think I am. Her gaze flickered, torn between the part of her that wanted to trust him and the part that feared it would only lead to more pain. Hope was a dangerous thing for someone like her, someone who had lost too much and learned the hard way not to believe in promises that came too easily. I wanted you to see me, Jackson repeated, his tone pleading, but she couldn't look at him anymore. The dam she had been holding back for weeks began to crack, and in one swift motion, she turned away from him, her body stiff with the weight of everything unsaid. Ilara's footsteps were quick, her mind telling her to walk away, to leave him behind for good. She had already been betrayed once by someone she trusted. Was this any different? But as she moved to leave, she heard his deep, steady voice, reach her. Do you feel nothing, Ilara? His words were a whisper, but they held the force of a tidal wave. She stopped, her breath hitched in her chest. She wanted to keep walking, to disappear into the night where no one could hurt her again. But something in his question stopped her cold. For a moment, neither of them moved. The rain pelted down, loud enough to drown out the world. Ilara turned slowly, the struggle in her eyes visible. She wasn't sure what hurt more, the man standing in front of her, or the fact that, despite everything, she wanted to believe him. The ache in her heart was sharp and unrelenting. She could feel the weight of her own emotions threatening to consume her. She had to protect herself. She couldn't trust him. Not again. I feel everything, she finally answered, her voice breaking in the middle of the sentence. Her eyes welled up, but she didn't let the tears fall. And that's the problem. You can't just sweep everything under the rug and expect it to go away. I can't just ignore it. Jackson took a step forward, a desperate plea in his eyes. I don't want you to forget anything. I want you to know the truth, the real truth. I don't know what that truth is anymore, she said, the words heavy with the weight of all the uncertainty that had built up inside her. I don't know who you are. The space between them felt endless. Jackson could see the wall she had built. It was impenetrable, and yet he had to try. He had to. His pulse quickened. Ilara, but she interrupted him, her voice louder this time, almost pleading. Don't you get it, Jackson? I can't do this again. I can't open my heart to someone who's already lying to me. You're just like everyone else. The words stung, but they weren't wrong. He had made his own mistakes, carried his own scars. And maybe she was right. Maybe he had kept his own distance, afraid of what was too real, too vulnerable. Her voice softened. I'm not some charity case, Jackson. I'm not the girl you can fix. You're not, he whispered, stepping closer now, his heart laid bare. But you deserve the world, and I'll spend every day showing you I'm worthy of your trust. The words hung in the air between them as the storm raged on. Her breath hitched. The tension was unbearable. But before either of them could speak again, Ilara turned away, walking into the rain. She didn't look back. Jackson stood there, motionless, watching her disappear into the mist, the ache in his chest growing with every step she took further away from him. Jackson Pierce had never been one to chase after anything, let alone a woman, but there was something about Ilara Sutton that made him question everything he'd ever known. He couldn't quite explain it, but every time he saw her, his world seemed to soften, as if she was the calm he never knew he needed. For weeks now, he'd made it a habit to visit the small cafe by the harbor, sitting in the shadows, watching her play piano, letting the music speak where words couldn't. He was careful not to crowd her, not to make her feel trapped by his presence. The last thing he wanted was to be the reason she withdrew again. But slowly, she began to trust him. It wasn't instant. Trust wasn't something that could be given freely. Not after the damage she'd endured. But with each visit, each shared glance, each moment of silence between them, she let her guard slip just a little. And with that, Jackson began to breathe easier, as though a weight he hadn't even realized was slowly being lifted. One evening, he finally asked her to compose a piece for a charity concert his foundation was hosting. It was small, intimate, but it was a start, a way for them to work together, to share something real without the complications of their past. She hesitated but ultimately agreed, something in her heart telling her it might be time to stop running. The decision felt like a step forward, a sign that she was ready to heal. It was the first time in months that Alara felt like herself again. For the first time since her world had been shattered, she felt a glimmer of peace. She threw herself into the composition, using every ounce of emotion, pain, and hope she'd carried with her for so long. For once, music was a release, not a burden. And for once, it felt like she could share it with someone who truly understood. But just as the warmth of hope began to take hold, it was ripped away. Alara's ex-fiancé, Colton Ray, appeared out of nowhere. His disheveled appearance and cold smile were enough to send a chill down her spine. Colton had been a part of her life she'd rather forget. He'd been the man who promised her the world and then stole it away, leaving her broken and alone. He was the man who betrayed her trust, and she had no intentions of letting him back into her life. But Colton wasn't there to apologize or make amends. He'd seen the headlines, saw her name connected to Jackson Pierce, the billionaire real estate mogul, and now he saw an opportunity. He didn't care about Alara's happiness. He didn't care about her past. All he saw was money, attention, and leverage. He cornered her outside the cafe one night, his voice low and dangerous. "I see you're playing with the big boys now, Alara. You think you can escape me that easily? Think again." With a twisted grin, he pulled out old photos from their time together. Pictures of her in vulnerable moments, caught in positions that could easily be twisted to paint her as someone she wasn't. "These could ruin your precious little reputation, sweetheart. And guess what? I'm the only one who can make sure it stays quiet. You'll do what I say, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you really are." Alara's stomach twisted with dread, but there was a fire in her chest now, a fierce determination to protect the life she'd begun to build. No longer was she the broken girl who let men walk all over her, but Colton wasn't just a man, he was a threat, a shadow from her past that wouldn't let her go. She tried to stand firm, but Colton wasn't done. He had other plans. The charity event, the one she'd agreed to compose for, was just days away. Colton knew the timing. He knew exactly where to hit. He showed up at the event, uninvited, with the intent to sabotage her. The tabloids had caught wind of his reappearance, and now he was trying to paint Alara as a gold digger, a woman who was only using Jackson to climb the social ladder. The crowd, already buzzing with whispers, began to turn their eyes toward her. But Jackson wasn't going to let that happen. As soon as he saw Colton's face in the crowd, his body tensed. He knew this wasn't just some coincidence. It was a deliberate attack on Alara. The anger that built inside him wasn't just about protecting his reputation. It was about protecting her, the woman who had shown him that love wasn't something to possess, but something to earn. Without hesitation, Jackson stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "Get him out of here," he said firmly, pointing toward Colton, whose smug expression faltered. Before Colton could protest, Jackson turned to the security team. "Give him a restraining order. Now, if he comes near her again, it's over, legally and permanently." But Jackson didn't stop there. This wasn't just about making Colton disappear. It was about sending a message to the world, to Alara. He took to the stage, live television cameras rolling, and spoke with a confidence he had never shown before. He addressed the crowd, his voice unwavering. "Alara Sutton taught me something I never understood. Love isn't something you buy or control. It's something you earn. And she earned mine." The room fell silent, and Alara, who had been standing at the back, felt the weight of his words wrap around her like a shield. The love that Jackson spoke of wasn't about wealth, wasn't about status. It was about respect, trust, and acceptance. For the first time in a long while, Alara allowed herself to believe in something more than just survival. Maybe she could finally have the life she'd always dreamed of. Maybe, just maybe, she could find love again. Real love. The kind that would never make her feel like she was worth less. Alara had vanished for days, leaving Jackson to wrestle with his fear that he had lost her again. The scandal with her ex-fiancé, Colton, had shaken them both, and in the silence that followed, Jackson found himself questioning everything, especially his own ability to truly love, without the shadow of his wealth overshadowing his heart. But on a stormy evening, When the sky seemed to echo his restlessness, Jackson stood outside the hotel where their story had begun. The rain poured heavily, his dark suit soaked, yet he refused to leave. He couldn't give up. Not now. And then, through the curtain of rain, she appeared. Her eyes were teary, but the faintest smile played at her lips. "You once asked if I felt nothing," she said softly, her voice almost drowned by the storm. "I remember," he replied, his heart racing. "I felt too much," she whispered, "because you were the first man who didn't ask me to be anyone but myself." At those words, Jackson's breath caught. He dropped the umbrella, the rain soaking both of them as he stepped forward, wrapping her in his arms. "I loved you in the silence of that first night," he murmured, his hands cupping her face, feeling the rain mix with her tears. "And I'll keep loving you in every storm." They kissed, not in desperation, not out of lust, but as two souls finally aligned. Their kiss was the culmination of everything they'd been through, all the misunderstandings, and all the quiet moments that had brought them here. This time, they didn't seek refuge from the rain in the hotel. They didn't need to escape. They were ready to face whatever came next, together. They went inside, hand in hand, not to run from the storm, but to start a new chapter, one of love, healing, and the promise of forever.